Hi, I'm George Norrie, and welcome to our Coast to Coast AM YouTube channel. Have fun, tell your friends, and share us with everyone. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Coast to Coast AM's mobile app. And always remember to log on to our website at coasttocoastam.com for daily articles, the best paranormal information, and all you need to know about your favorite guests. And now you can become a Coast Insider directly through the Coast mobile app. We welcome our international listeners and even offer a free 2-week trial. So don't delay. Become an insider today. And welcome back to Coast. George Norrie with you, Mark Carpenter with us, anthropologist, explorer, author. A couple of his books are on his website, markacarpenter.com. He has worked on Mayan archaeological excavations on the Yucatan Peninsula. He has analyzed prehistoric Mexico. He's spent years living alongside various Native American tribes and Polynesians in North America and Hawaii, studying their ancient traditions. And his expertise is of human origin paradigms, and he is considered a rogue cultural scholar, accusing the scientific establishment of conspiracy to distort human history. Mark, we're going to talk about that, but welcome to the program.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Looking forward to this. How did you get involved in anthropology and archaeology?
Well, it went back to my childhood. Like a lot of 80s kids, I thought Indiana Jones was a very cool character, and my father and his family had some rural land out in Ohio, the Ohio River Valley. And there were burial mounds out there, not on our land per se, but, you know, when we used to drive through, I was fascinated by these burial mounds, and my father didn't really have a satisfactory explanation, so that's kind of where it all began.
Fascinated ever since, haven't you?
Yeah, I was hooked. I had to know.
Let's talk about the Smithsonian. Tell us about that. Is it kind of like a depository of all the old relics, or what is that place?
Yeah, that's a good question. It masquerades as this beacon of education. That's what we've always been taught that it is, and that's easy to believe because that's what we want it.
We want it to be that.
And it should be. You know, a society like ours should have that. But that's not the reality. The reality is institutions like the Smithsonian, particularly the Smithsonian, were founded, you know, by elites, the secret society, frat boy types. And they were building a nation. And what it really became, or what it really is a beacon of their version of human history
that they want us to learn and
right.
and think about. Yeah,
they collect the artifacts and the remains and the art and the culture and the relics and everything, and they may draw their own conclusions behind closed doors. But as far as they're concerned, it's a mechanism by which the few control the many. They like this divide of information and knowledge. They think of it as their
aristocracy.
Thank you. Their aristocratic privilege is what I was trying to say.
What was it, Mark, that got you to start thinking this way? You're not alone in this, by the way. But what was it that got you to think this way?
My paradigm was lost in Mexico.
What happened?
The Yucatan. I was head first in to be a PhD, and I was prepared to spend my life toiling in the jungles of Mexico to understand the Maya and their disappearance, or their alleged disappearance.
Right.
And it was like the disillusion tale of a film. I found myself, my naivete was just shattered. I found that this was a rigid orthodoxy, and you were going to get in line or you were going to drown. And I was obsessed. I still am with Pakal and the Red Queen at the ancient Mayan site known as Palenque. And what I found there was a cover-up. Those remains are missing. The DNA from Pakal and the Red Queen. And for anyone who's not familiar, Pakal and the Red Queen, think of them as like the King Tut of Mayan archaeology.
Mm-hmm.
These are rock stars of the Mayan archaeological world. Most important find in the history of Mayan archaeology: two pristine rulers' tombs discovered in burial chambers within pyramids.
Well, why distort the information about them?
That is such a priceless question. Why? To understand that question, we really have to go back to what we were talking about before, the founding of institutions like the Smithsonian. And we need to understand how these institutions operate, who controls them,
Mm-hmm.
the money, of course. And in this case, we've got the INAH, which is the National Institute of Anthropology and History. They're essentially the Mexican Smithsonian. They were funding this dig on a dollar-for-dollar matched basis with the Rockefeller Foundation.
That's pretty extensive.
Yeah, and the Rockefeller Foundation and the Smithsonian and National Geographic and UNESCO, these are all tentacles of the same creature. And so back to the question, why distort this? Well, because it impacts the human history narrative,
Which they want us to believe their narrative.
Yes, exactly. You see, you can trace this back. A good crystallization of this you can trace back to John D. Rockefeller. He essentially founded the Board of Education. I believe this was 1910. It could have been 1901. I get the 1 and the 0 mixed up. But when he did so, I forget what it was, $1 billion, $300 million in 1901, 10. Anyway, he said, he's known for this quote, I don't want thinkers, I want workers.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really want to boil it down, that's, I think, the human history narrative is designed to enslave the public.
What would they want us to believe, Mark?
Oh, well, they like their social Darwinist narrative that I think most people kind of in their hearts do believe, that we are the product of
evolution.
Yeah, we are the product of it. Now, that's a tricky business there because we're not going to discount all of evolution, but what we're really talking about there is the origin of species, which is a huge misunderstanding. The point being that if humans believe, the public believes, that they are essentially animals, and the product of this evolution and the focus of their life really is what? Materialism, then. Consumerism. Well, they like that just fine. And they would rather not tamper with that. And these discoveries most certainly would do that in the hearts and minds of people, hence why I am here on this program.
Do they not want us to believe in God, Mark?
They don't. They don't want us to believe in God. They pretend like religious freedom is important to them or to the nation, but that's not the reality. That they would prefer, because you see, a public that is devoted to a deity, and mind you, this has nothing to do with what the reality is. It doesn't matter. We're not drawing any divisions here, but a public that is devout in their religious beliefs, well, their deity and their beliefs then are the supreme authority in their hearts and minds. However, if they are reduced to animals, worker bees in a colony, well, then the state authority is essentially their god.
Why would they care, Mark, what we believe?
Because they care about their delusional empires. Power is the simple answer there. Their rule over the masses and their empire, which, by the way, again, is kind of a delusion. It doesn't really belong to them. They think it does because they control the money. But so that's they would just prefer our box, meaning our mental box, to be smaller, not larger.
We started this program talking about the Kennewick man. Can you explain a little bit more about him and why you believe there could be a little controversy here?
Yes. So Kennewick man, the reason I wanted to begin with this is because Kennewick, there's been for years, many years now, and I'm sure you're very familiar with this, there's been rumors and claims of a Smithsonian conspiracy, as we said, to distort human history. And most of these claims revolve around the early 20th century, late 19th, early 20th century discoveries of abnormally large skeletons.
Giants.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
Giants unearthed in the burial mounds, just like the ones I was speaking of earlier
Mm-hmm.
in Marietta, the Ohio River Valley. Okay. So Kennewick man is the proverbial smoking gun that proves definitively here and now a Smithsonian conspiracy to distort human history by way of concealing abnormal human remains.
Where are the remains as we speak?
The Kennewick man's remains, as we speak, were allegedly repatriated to a secret location back near where he was discovered by an indigenous tribe. Allegedly, a ceremony with 200 natives and some scientists allegedly repatriated these remains back in Kennewick near where they were found, allegedly.
You still think they're at the Smithsonian, don't you?
I don't know. They're so compromised. They're so compromised. I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled some sort of scam there.
Would this skeleton of Kennewick show us that he might have been a giant?
Yes, I think so. They claim he was 5'7", 160 some odd pounds. But I can prove definitively, and by their own evidence, when the Kennewick controversy initially erupted, the Smithsonian, who likes to play hide and seek with these bones, was suddenly caught with their pants down.
And there was like a 9-year court case over this and all that, wasn't there?
Yes, exactly. Because of the controversy between the government, the scientists, and the Native Americans, there was suddenly mass media interest in these bones.
Yeah, the Native American tribes claim those bones were theirs, right?
Yes, they did. The Native Americans claim those are our bones, and we want them repatriated under the Act. And the government, was sort of playing tug of war with them. Interestingly, the court ultimately ruled that the U.S. Army Corps did act in bad faith, and they ended up having to pay $2 million of the Native Americans' court costs. So they were, by way of legal precedent, they were lying in court. But anyway, the point is, mass media like NPR and the Smithsonian, they were forced to reveal photographs of these bones because there was too much interest by too many people who were not involved in any kind of conspiracy for them to play dumb like they normally do, or just claim nonsense, right, with the older bones. Oh, those bones never existed, whatever. But everybody knew these bones existed.
Was this a big story back in '96?
It was. It was big. It was international news because of the scientific weight of it, you see.
Right.
And so when they would normally not like to reveal these bones to anyone ever, they suddenly found themselves, being hounded by powerful media journalists demanding photos of these bones that they know they have. And so, if you carefully examine now, the real bone photographs were quickly eclipsed by loads of photographs of replicas.
Ah.
Now, they admit that they're replicas, but the trick is, the devil is in the details. The replica skull and skeleton is quite different than those original photos. If you examine those original photos carefully, what you discover is a radically deformed skull.
And a large skull at that.
A very, very large, deformed, I've seen a lot of deformed skulls in my day, and this is one of the most warped I've ever seen.
Now, what makes that so significant?
Yeah, so it's not just the warped skull. Another more careful examination of the bones also reveals that he has 5 fingers on his right hand, but no thumb. And he has the additional bones for a thumb. So he certainly had a thumb. And this would mean that he had 6 fingers.
6.
And that would make him a polydactyl.
Was that common in that time period, 9,000 years ago?
Well, I'll tell you where it is common. It's common in ancient tradition in relation to narratives regarding these hybridized giant species like the biblical Nephilim.
Aha, okay.
The book of Samuel specifically says...
Cross between man and angel, right?
Correct. And that's right. The Nephilim, for any who are not familiar, according to the narrative, were the hybridized offspring of non-human beings, angelic beings, if you like, watchers, many names for them.
And the daughters of men.
Yes, thank you. And they interbred with mortals, humans, and they created these gigantic, invasive hybrids. And they were lawless and evil and cannibalistic.
How tall would Kennewick man be if we were able to get to that skeleton, in your opinion?
Well, I could speculate. Now, I can't prove this, but what is interesting about the photo of the skeleton is that the entire photo is taken on a black surface. The bones are deliberately laid on now, see, they did that on purpose because now you have no
reference,
scale reference.
That's right. Good
so
point.
There's really no telling. That thing could be huge. I suspect, and this is pure speculation, but I would guess that he was probably well over 7 feet. I would say he's between 7 and 8 feet tall.
Mark, is perhaps one of the reasons why they create this conspiracy cover-up is because they don't want to validate the Bible?
I would say that's definitely a factor. Absolutely, yes. In the early, and when this cover-up began initially, the Bureau of Ethnology, Cyrus Thomas, these types of people, some of the original Bureau of Ethnology, and that, by the way, that was the Smithsonian before the Smithsonian, they concluded that these mounds were the construction of a, quote, vanished race, end quote. It became known as the vanished race theory. And I think they understood absolutely that there were links to the old world and to the biblical Nephilim, and that is definitely a factor for why they would cover it up at the time. Darwinism was booming, and concepts like manifest destiny, the combination of those two essentially justified any tyrannical, genocidal, eugenic type of agendas that they had. So absolutely, they did not want to validate the Bible.
What are they afraid of, Mark?
There's a biblical passage about how the guilty run when no one's chasing them. And, that's not verbatim the text, but that's the essence of it. And it's something similar to that. For the common person, we have a hard time fathoming why they wouldn't just operate above board. Why, you've got all this money and power in your empire.
Why cover it up? It's a great story.
Yeah, why? Yeah, right. I know. You would think like people in the Smithsonian, but again, this comes down to privilege. I think you'll find these people understand the value of information and the power of knowledge. And they regard this, just like in ancient times, that this is an aristocratic privilege. And so, these secret society types and their skulls and their bones, they would prefer this knowledge be their exclusive domain.
What about the teeth?
And the public just be the worker drones.
What about the teeth?
Yes. Okay. So another discovery in 2008 in Siberia, in Denisova Cave, a tooth was discovered. Now, you can see this tooth is on my blog. You can also see it in the published photo the Smithsonian published of it in their article. The title of the article is something, there's a link, I believe, on your end. The title is something like Huge Denisovan Tooth Reveals New Human Ancestor. Now, this tooth is monstrous. This tooth is nearly double the height, width, and diameter of an average Homo sapien molar.
It's like a shark's tooth almost.
Well, when they initially discovered it, they thought it had to be an extinct bear's tooth, like this extinct species of cave bear that was enormous. They thought that's what it had to have been, which is interesting because that'll give you just real quick anthropology. Large tooth equals large jawbone equals large cranium equals large torso. And you might read some nonsense here and there about hominids having larger teeth to jawbone ratios. Nonsense. Those teeth have absolutely been used by anthropologists to estimate the size, approximate size, of a primate with nothing more than teeth and jawbone.
We're going to take calls with Mark Carpenter next hour. Mark, it's an incredible discovery. Has this backfired on you professionally?
Absolutely.
I thought
absolutely. It would. The entire Mayan fiasco, that was my career. I fell on my sword. I mean, they told me that I would never get access, to the remains or to the report. Well, I confronted them about reports missing from the INAH archives, and they told me, you'll never see those reports. And when I realized how corrupt the system really was, I knew I was just going to have to go it alone.
They basically wanted you to back off, didn't they?
Oh, well, they offered me a job. They tried to bribe me first. They offered me a sweet job, a dream job, an absolute dream. Essentially, it was a fast track to having my own little fiefdom of archaeology in the Mayan world. It was essentially what they were offering me, and it was so incredibly tempting. But I realized it was what it was. It was a bribe.
Geez, now
you can't. If I accepted it, they would own me, and I won't be owned.
And you wouldn't be telling us this story, that's for sure.
That's right. I would be Then this is what happens, by the way, to a lot of the best and the brightest. They come to these little weird moral dilemmas, and they say, what my whole life has been about being a scientist, so I'm going to go, I'm going to go with the flow, and they become enslaved.
How many scientists like you are still out there fighting for the truth?
We're an endangered species.
That's what I would think.
In an ever more consumer material expensive world, people are not trying to rock the boat with their careers, and they love. Most of them, they either, they're either scared of losing their career, or they actually drink the Kool-Aid and think that it's,
What other secrets are out there, Mark?
Well, that Denisovan tooth proves definitively, Kennewick Man proves definitively that the Smithsonian is orchestrating a cover-up of ancient deformed remains. The Denisovan tooth proves definitively that giants existed.
I mean, how big would a giant have to be to match that tooth?
That tooth is really huge.
It's a couple inches long, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say that there's no way the hominid that tooth belonged to was anything less than 10 feet, and that's conservative. It's probably more like 12, 13. And I can't even begin to imagine what its musculature frame was like, because these things it's robust. The volume of it is more impressive to me than the height, and the height is insane. And I'm gonna, we might as well just take this a bit further. I doubt they're extinct.
Where are they?
Well, now, extinct, no, but relic population, yes. I would say, we have explored less than, of all the subterranean cave systems on Earth, we have mapped maybe 1% of them. And of the map,
it's why we can't find Bigfoot.
I said that. I misspoke. We've discovered maybe 1% and mapped maybe 1% of the 1%. And you can also look at theories like Hapgood and Jules Verne discussions about the hollow Earth. I suspect their relic population that was nearly obliterated by Younger Dryas event and Homo sapien competition, right, which is where all these conflicts in the narratives come from. David and Goliath, Beowulf and Grendel, so on and so forth.
I was going to just ask you about David and Goliath. He truly slayed a giant, did he?
I think so. I think so, because you see, the narrative by itself is easy to dismiss. A giant, and the Book of Samuel goes on to discuss Goliath's relatives. And this is where we find the passage about polydactyly. He says, a huge man of giant stature with 6 fingers on each hand and foot, 24 in total, and he was born of the Nephilim, born of the giant. That's very interesting, because they're saying he's not Nephilim per se. He's a descendant. So he's a hybridized descendant. And this is precisely what we find in the archaeological record in Mexico.
He's the offspring of the Nephilim, you think?
Yes, they're that's right. They're descendants. So they're generations removed. So they become more and more Homo sapien. But still they have this Nephilim genetic, and that's where we get these deformities. That's why those deformities are so important. The 6 fingers, the enormous stature, the elongated, deformed craniums, and the cannibalism, and also the demonic religion that they perpetuate as well.
We're going to take your calls next hour with Mark, so get ready to make the call as we talk about these ancient civilizations and share your thoughts on that. It's truly remarkable. Will we ever get the answers public?
I'm working on it. My research is I've uncovered a lot. I can prove quite a bit definitively. It's going to take more You know, but it's interesting that there's a lot that can be gleaned even from their cover-ups and from your own research. And when you look at my expertise being the sort of the big picture of ancient paradigms, I think you can there's a lot more to ancient tradition than we in the modern Western world give it credit for. The ancients passed a lot of very precious knowledge to us, and I think we really need to go back and we need to return to our fundamental core beliefs and values.
I wonder what kind.
I don't think we don't need too much science to do that.
Wonder what kind of trove of treasures are in the basement of the Smithsonian.
Oh my goodness. Oh well, they've certainly got a lot of bones down there. They've got a lot of bones, and who knows? Who knows the depths of what they have? A lot of strange artifacts, a lot of old world artifacts. I think they've covered up.
This 9,000-year-old Kennewick man, do you believe that age is correct?
It's difficult to say because I've proven definitively they're compromised. So anything they say is suspect. However, there were so many scientists involved, and they were so excited about the ancientness of Kennewick man. I don't know.
Yeah, what did they find? They found in '96. They found a skull, right?
Yeah, in the park holds these motorboat, airboat races, and some airboat racers walking along the Columbia River found a skull
that had come up from erosion or something like that. Just popped up.
Yeah, there had been well, it rains out there a lot, but there had just been a downpour, and they were just in the right place at the right time, and they just stumbled onto this skull. And yeah, the carbon dating, it's hard to say. They're so compromised. I do have to take anything they say with a whole bottle of salt.
Do you know if these two who discovered the skull are still around?
I tried to track them down. I really did. I looked on the internet for them. I couldn't really find them.
Can't find them.
I'm not a bounty hunter, but they're out there probably.
It was only 27 years ago, right?
Yeah. Hey, if you guys are hearing this, I'd love to chat with you
or call us.
Yeah.
William Thomas and David Deasy.
That's right.
Interesting discovery. Well, what's next, Mark? What happens next for you?
Well, I think it's important. I want to talk about the depths of this cover-up because it goes much further than distortions of bones and history. This is modern day, and we're talking about missing people. These abnormal finds correlate with modern-day clusters of missing people. And it also relates to national parks and UNESCO. If a place has been deemed a UNESCO World Heritage Site, then you can automatically know that no authentic research is coming out of there. It is the kiss of death of archaeological investigation. But most importantly, you should be aware that there might be ongoing phenomena, dangerous phenomena.
Dangerous in what way?
Well, people go missing in these national parks.
Well, that's right. David Paulides has done a great job working on that.
Yes, and I believe I have solved his mystery.
What do you think happened?
I think they're being abducted.
By?
I think by these Nephilim descendants who continue to live on hidden in these areas.
But nobody hears screams or anything like that.
Well, what we have to understand is these Nephilim descendants, while human, are not Homo sapien. And when you have those kinds of wild cranial capacity, evolutionary anthropologists directly associate cranial capacity with cognitive ability. And the Native Americans will tell you that these things, these Nephilim descendants is what I prefer to call them.
Are they dimensional?
Well, it's difficult to say precisely what their capabilities are, but I can tell you from studying the cultures in so many different cultures, there are universal parallels of them having beyond Homo sapien physical and cognitive capabilities.
What would you say, Mark, has been the most fascinating aspect of what you do?
That's I would have to say the most fascinating aspect to me is the profound irony of how cutting-edge scientific discoveries and technology have, for me personally, pointed me back to ancient tradition.
Interesting.
In other words, science validating ancient tradition is just incredible to me, and it's been a journey. I'm the sheep who found his way home.
Now, you were talking about how you believe some of these entities are grabbing people like David Paulides has theorized in state parks and stuff. What do they do with the people? Kill them, eat them? What do they do?
I was going to say, I'm afraid it's the worst imaginable. Yes, they're eating them. In the case of the upstate New York disappearances, like Tom Mezek and Fred Drum, these are some of the most recent disappearances. Huge searches, found absolutely nothing, disappeared 40 miles in 10 days from each other. They took the whole gigantic search party and moved it 40 miles south with an identical result. 2 elderly men gone.
Poof.
The point I would like to make about that is this area is known by the Ojibwa tribe to harbor the Wendigo. And the Wendigo, by their own description, is an emaciated giant cannibal. And I noticed that these 2 disappearances, and quite a number of them, occur in early winter. In this case, it was November, and a lot of the area where a lot of this occurs is in the Adirondack Mountains. Well, Adirondack is an ancient Native American word that means bark eaters. And what that is a reference to are their predecessors, their primitive predecessors who did not practice agriculture and lived up there in those mountains, or still lives there. And they call them bark eaters because they did not practice agriculture. The winters up there are so brutal, they had to resort to eating the tree bark. And so I believe, yes, and there's more evidence of this, by the way, in the Southwest Chaco Canyon. Professor Christy Turner and his work, Mancorn, has proven definitively that a great deal of cannibalism occurred in Chaco Canyon with the Anasazi people, and this is all related. Enoch 7, the biblical text, describes how the Nephilim took to eating the people because they could not be sustained.
Wow, if people knew that, they'd be panicking. Maybe that's why the Smithsonian's hiding them.
Well, you mentioned Paulides in one of Paulides' books, in the case that he studied. A ranger or somebody confessed that maybe perhaps it was off the record, but said that, well, they can't announce that there's these people, these feral people living in caves out here because they can't capture them. And so they're not going to come out publicly and say, oh, by the way, we know there's some people living in here, but we can't find them. And we have reason to believe they're killing people. Have a nice day.
Right, exactly. People would panic, wouldn't they?
Well, who knows? Yeah. I wonder if people would, like the good old days, would rally together and go up there and look for them. That might be terrible, actually. So maybe it is good that I don't know. I certainly wouldn't advise that. On the other hand, I certainly don't think people should be frolicking about these national parks thinking that the worst thing they have to worry about might be a bear or a mountain lion.
Right.
No, there's other things out there. It's a narcissistic concept to think that, oh, I am the supreme creature out here in this wilderness, and therefore, me and my firearm and my GPS, I'm supremely safe. You're not.
Any idea what the population size might be, Mark?
That's really difficult to say. I know that and this is a scary thing, the Chaco Canyon civilization, Anasazi, which, by the way, that word means ancient ancestors or ancient enemies. And that is, by the way, the meaning behind that is ancient enemy as in a rival species. They were plentiful, and that was only 1,000 years ago. Less than 1,000 years ago, there were a lot of them in New Mexico, and it seems like they were revolted against, which happens when you're operating a vicious cannibalistic cult. It's really hard to say, but I would put it like this: although a relic population, more than you might think. If we probably knew how many of them there were, it would probably be terrifying.
That could be. You ready for some calls?
Oh, sure.
Let's go to Kelly in Eugene, Oregon to get us started. Hi, Kelly. Welcome to the program.
Well, thank you.
Sure.
My question is, I heard a story, several different ones, that they discovered the bodies of Adam and Eve. And the reason that they believe it's Adam and Eve is because they had no belly buttons. Because they weren't, actually born. They were created. And I was just wondering if you've heard anything like that.
I've never heard that one, Mark. How about you?
No. Can you give me some more details about this alleged find? Like, what continent are we talking about?
Yeah, I can't remember exactly where. I heard it several years ago, and then I just heard it again a couple months ago. And, yeah, just that they found these two bodies, entombed, and the reason they believed it was Adam and Eve was just because there was no belly buttons.
That's interesting.
That's a web search.
I've come across all manner of weird, accounts of tombs containing deformed remains that are really, really bizarre. So nothing surprises me anymore these days. But that is a new one on me.
Years ago, Mark, I interviewed a soldier from Afghanistan, and he claims that they found a giant in a cave.
Yes, Kandahar.
You remember that story?
I do, and I always take a very objective. Because my training and years of experience have taught me to be very objective whenever I hear a story. So I neither believe nor disbelieve. I want to investigate. And I will say, though, that story rings very true on a lot of different levels that someone inventing a story probably wouldn't have.
Good point.
Particularly the red hair.
You do know the story. That's right.
Yeah, there's definitely real genetic DNA science that indicates that hominids like Neanderthals had red hair.
Let's go to Dwayne in the state of Washington. First-time caller for Dwayne. Hi, Dwayne. Go ahead, Dwayne.
Yeah, great to be on with you guys.
Thank you.
Interesting discussion. I'm wondering, just is there any kind of tie-in between? I'm right north of where they found that tooth. I might go look here this summer. Now you got my mind going, but is there any kind of tie-in between, like you say, in the Mayans, though, that skull, and like in like the Grand Canyon area, or remember they found a bunch of caves and stuff in the Grand Canyon, and like along in the Midwest, I think it was Kansas, there was some stuff. Somehow I think they're trying to tie it in with the early, what are they, the Knights Templar, and they found Egyptian artifacts and whatnot, but tying into this with the caves with Jesus and, I don't know, the Knights Templar and the Mayans, you know how it kind of all comes together? You get my meaning here?
Yeah. I would say there is a lot of interlinkage. Definitely the anomalies in the Grand Canyon. Well, first of all, we've got missing people in the Grand Canyon. We've got a huge. I'm so glad you brought up the Grand Canyon. These national parks, like Mesa Verde and Grand Canyon National Park, Yosemite, we tend to think of these, they're national parks. They're like open to the public, wide open. No, there are huge sections of these parks that are illegal to explore. The one you're talking about in the Grand Canyon, if you look at it on Google Earth, you'll notice that the landmarks have some really peculiar names, like the Temple of Isis and the Tower of Ra.
Yeah, strange names.
Yeah, names that are, I have another definitive piece of evidence that the Smithsonian is orchestrating a cover-up. That there was originally a news story by the Arizona Gazette that they found old world Hindu and Egyptian resembling artifacts in artificial caves and all manner of relics and whatnot in the Grand Canyon. And the news article says Professor Jordan is enthused, and they quote this Professor Jordan. Okay, so flash forward to modern times. That was in the early, 1920, 1910, something like that. The Smithsonian said publicly, this is nonsense. There is no Professor Jordan. We never heard of Professor Jordan. There's no caves. It's all just a bunch of nonsense. Except they do know who Professor Jordan is because he worked for them for 30 years, going down the Colorado River, studying biology. And indeed, Professor Jordan existed. I have his photograph from their archives. And not only that, Professor Jordan was involved in eugenics programs later on. But to get back to your question about how it all ties in, I wouldn't get too carried away with Jesus and the Templars, and definitely the biblical Nephilim and the elite secret society people who control America. That is all interrelated, and they are covering it up. That much I can tell you for sure.
Let's go to Randy in Fontana, California, west of the Rockies. Randy, thanks for calling. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call, George.
Sure thing.
This topic's right up my alley, man.
Perfect.
Hey, to go back to your question, George, about why, I know why. I've been into this stuff for like 20, 30 years, and the only logical conclusion you can come to is that there is a cabal of people on this planet who have a different history. They know the true history, and it's a history that involves God. I mean, look at Thebes. Look at Thebes over there in Egypt. It was, I mean, there's no explaining how it was just torn apart, and it burned, and there's stones there that are burned, and all over the planet there's you could see that there was a world before this one. And so my question to Mark is, hey, Mark, do you believe that these people believe in God? They know he exists, if you ask me.
Well, so the people that you're referring to, they too are Nephilim descendants. And they do believe in God, and they despise him. And they look at it as they're damned, like vampires. Like they are, the Nephilim bloodlines are cursed because they are Nephilim bloodlines. And they're earmarked for eradication. And it's kind of like death row inmates who know they're doomed, and so why not commit more crime while you're on death row, you know? And so that's the way they look at it. But yeah, you can do an internet search for 8th grade student discovers that all the presidents are related.
Mark, do you think there's anything demonic behind any of this?
Absolutely. The Nephilim were spawned by demons. The gods of the Nephilim are demons. And they worship, and the Nephilim themselves were deified as demons. Think about
they were the fallen ones, right?
Yes. That translation is very interesting. I believe what it really means is to fall. In ancient terminology, to fall upon someone was to prey on them. And the fall, what we translate as fallen ones, I think actually means those who prey upon their enemy, predators. Essentially, is what that word means, I think.
We're going to take final calls next hour with Mark Carpenter as we are talking about this incredible work he's been doing as an anthropologist and an archaeologist, explorer, and author. How many books do you have out, Mark?
So I have 2 books, one fiction, one nonfiction. The fiction is called Paradigm Lost, and the nonfiction is called The Nephilim Theory. And they are designed to complement one another. And the reason I wrote a fictional book was to reach the widest possible audience.
What's the significance of the extra fingers you were talking about?
Well, this is one of those genetic traits. The 6-finger aspect is really, really fascinating because it enables us to trace these genetics through the ancient world and even into the ancient narrative. A lot of the iconography of ancient Mayan cities and cult centers like Palenque depict these demigod rulers. In Mayan scholarship, they refer to them as holy lords. But they're demigod despotic rulers. They are Nephilim descendants, and many of them are depicted with 6 fingers. And we can trace this back very far into some of the oldest iconography in the Mayan world at San Bartolo. You find evidence of this demigod, this maize god, and he has 6 fingers, and he is committing or practicing ritualistic bloodletting to appease his demonic deity, and then he is establishing Mayan civilization.
But they're not that old, are they, Mark?
No, they're not. That's exactly right. The 6-fingered cannibalistic descendants. They were present in New Mexico and Chaco Canyon less than 1,000 years ago.
Let's go to the phones. Cornelius in Louisiana is with us. Hello there, Mr. White.
Hey there, George and Mark. Boy, I got to tell you, Mr. Mark, there's a place called Poverty Point, Louisiana, that has a bunch of Indian mounds, so I'll hope you'll come to Louisiana. I want to invite all the coast listeners and callers. We've got Mardi Gras going on, so laissez les bon temps rouler. Let the good times roll and throw me something, mister. My question for you, Mark, I'm the God Guns and Gold man, the Bible Bullets and Beans man, and you have a biblical name just like I do, Cornelius. Do you think that we're in the end times, and with these different disappearances in the national parks, I think it's demonic also, but they're interdimensional beings and stuff. And if you look at Dr. David Jacobs, he says if you use the name of Jesus Christ, these beings disappear. So God bless you, George, and Coast to Coast AM and Mr. Mark. Y'all have a blessed day now, you hear?
What do you think of that, Mark? Invoking the name.
Well, Psalms 91 is said to be a very powerful mechanism. Well, and first of all, thank you, Cornelius. I might just take you up on that. I'll come see y'all, some gumbo, check out the mound. The Psalms 91 is said to be, the rabbinical scholars held Psalm 91 in very high esteem as a mechanism. Certainly, you could evoke the name of Christ, probably to the same effect. But Christ himself probably would have recited Psalm 91 back to back in Aramaic or Hebrew in order to achieve the effect.
Let's go to Gino in St. Louis. Hello, Gino. Take it away.
Hey, George. How you doing?
Okay.
Good to hear from you again. Talk to you.
You too,
Hey, Mark,
Gino.
I got a question.
All right.
Antarctica. A whole bunch of representatives from all the major countries in the world went down there a few years ago, and they saw something. It came back, and now everybody's for climate change. See, I've always thought they did that because they got scared. They saw something that they think might repeat or come again, and that's why we have all this emphasis on climate change. It's not people trying to make a buck. It's people are scared that something's going to happen. Can you tell me what you think about that?
Well, I think you're definitely on to something. The exploration of Antarctica and the reports that come out of there have been nonsense. You know, going back, Operation High Jump. Now, I want to tread a little bit lightly because people, there's something very strange going on there. But then, the wild speculation gets a little bit carried away. I don't think there's Nazis down there, although they were interested in it, of course, as a submarine base and did explore it. And even, yes, there's some talk that they may have discovered an entrance into the hollow earth. And I think that's really what it's about. I think what they discovered there are remnants of an ancient civilization and remnants of that ancient civilization as stewards or guardians of this underworld and this passageway. And so I suspect that's why the world leaders are so interested in visiting, because it may be a point at which our species and their species, or more specifically our civilization and their civilization, may be interacting. Or just the fact that, just discovery of their presence would warrant all these visits. How exactly it relates to their climate narrative, I can't say exactly, but I think you're definitely on the right track with the leaders going there, and whatever is there is certainly scary. Yes.
Let's go to Kelly in the state of Washington. Hi, Kel. Go ahead.
Yeah, good evening, guys. Or
Hey,
actually,
Kelly.
good morning. To touch base a little bit on that, the one guy actually missed his election to go down there and talk with those guys at that meeting. But I was wondering, the reason why they're keeping this under wraps is because it's the truth, and how are you going to tell, billions of people that, we're going to go through another mass extinction? And, what do you think about that?
Well, sometimes the truth itself is beautifully simple. And you saying the ultimate motivation for them to cover it up is because it's the truth is exactly correct. because if you are a member of 2,000 or 3,000 human beings who rule over 7 or 8 billion human beings, well, then you would prefer it that you know the truth and they not. Very simple.
Joe in New York, take it away, Joseph.
George, thanks for taking the call.
Sure, Joe.
I just got a quick question. Any information, Mark, on the story about the military or Marines going into one of the national parks, finding something and being kind of traumatized by it? And a real quick second question is, any new information on the Dark Pyramid in Alaska? I've seen a show on it. I haven't heard anything since. Thanks for taking the call, George. I appreciate it.
What was that, Joe?
The Dark Pyramid in Alaska. Any new information on that?
Nothing,
and then the first question was regarding our Marines going into a national park.
I see.
And trying to find, I think they were trying to find one of the giants or look for them.
Okay, go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, so the disappearance that I mentioned earlier, Paulides mentions in his books and in one of his programs as well, Tom Mezek in upstate New York. There was a huge military response to allegedly just a guy missing. Now, we like that armed forces come out and show support, but in this case, I think it was suspicious, highly so. And Paulides also talks about the involvement of the FBI, and that he's absolutely right, because the FBI does not investigate a random person missing in the woods. But what they do investigate is a long-standing pattern of interstate criminal abduction and potential murder. And that's what they know it is because they've been tracking it for a long time. So, yes, there are instances of military personnel going in there and looking for but as far as I can tell, they come up empty every time.
There's a TV show about this pyramid in Alaska, and it's supposed to have a government facility underneath where they're hiding ETs and things like that. It's weird.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I'm not familiar with that, but I will say there are some very strange things going on up in the Arctic by the United States government and military. I can assure you that is true. I can't really speak on this pyramid because I haven't researched it, but that would not surprise me at all. Alaska is the perfect place. And I believe they have found remnants of civilization up there. I published an article called Arctic Anomalies. A reader sent me all manner of strange photos and Google Earth. And yeah, it seems that some of these tributaries up there in the way North Arctic, we can't confirm anything, but it really looks like there's submerged ruins up there. Not to mention this is mainstream science. They have found both dinosaur bones and petroglyphs way far north up in the Arctic where they should not exist, according to the conventional narrative.
East
of the
Rockies.
A lot of strange stuff going on up there.
Let's go to Guy in Florida. Welcome to the show. Go ahead, Guy.
Hello.
Hi.
It's come to my attention that there's so many of your listeners that are also very, very avid supporters of David Paulides. We listen to him almost on a daily basis.
Yes, that's
his
true.
Progress, we follow his progress. And don't you think that, given what you've discovered, that it's time that you sat down and talked to the guy face to face for a while and let us in on what you've determined? Because the two of you together, I think, would be just great.
That's a great question. I reached out to Paulides. I did correspond with him briefly, and I'm sad to say he was not really interested. I'm willing to. I would like to. Whatever. Maybe he was prematurely dismissive because he probably gets lots of weird messages saying they know who's, the solution to his mystery, and perhaps it was a misunderstanding. I'm certainly willing to sit down with him again. But more important to me than collaborating with Paulides is getting the message to the families. These missing people are not statistics or just little dots on a map. These are human beings that have families, and I can't imagine a worse torture than to have a loved one vanish and have no closure.
Oh, my God, especially when they're with you out there in the woods.
Oh, God, could you imagine some of these are kids vanish, but I get to this really strange place where it's like, yes, I want to relieve these people and give them their closure, but in order to do that, I have to give them a nightmare. Yeah, it's like people say, I want to know, but I would ask them to search their soul and be sure about that, because I believe what happened to these people was absolutely nightmarish. But I can say that they didn't just fall or get lost, but they were killed by something ancient and unholy. And people should also be aware, don't go out to these places and think you're just going for a stroll in a beautiful wilderness. There's more to it than that.
West of the Rockies, Mark's with us, Roseville, California. Hi, Mark. Go ahead.
Hi, George and Mark. I had a grandfather that was born with 11 fingers and 11 toes on my mom's side. He was born in Pozzolo, Italy. It's adjacent from Venuvius, and they burned him off.
They burned off? Wow.
Yeah, they burned off a toe and a finger, the extra digit.
Did they? Was that because they believed it had some, malignant or evil significance, or just did they just think
it was a long time ago when my grandfather was born.
You can function, Mark, with an extra digit, can't you?
Oh, well, not only can you function, it gives you increased dexterity. Sailors were fond of polydactyl, and I would like to point out that polydactylism does occur. That's not necessary, someone's not like inherently, this does happen with a certain percentage of the population and may or may not have anything to do with Nephilim genetics. However, but back to the point about dexterity, sailors would keep polydactyl cats on ships because they were superior climbers and hunters. And having a polydactyl cat on a ship would just meant death to all rodents on the ship. And interestingly, the biblical descriptions and what we have in Native American lore and the archaeological records suggest indeed these Nephilim descendants were excellent hunters and climbers.
Fantastic. Mark, I want to thank you for being on the show. Stay in touch with us. Get a hold of our executive producer, Lisa, and she might be able to put you in touch with Paulides.
Okay, great. And hey, I just want to say, George, I really, really appreciate everything you and your team does. I think it's really important that platforms like this exist where people can just speak their mind, speak the truth.
We're looking for the truth. Thank you very much. Mark Carpenter, website linked up at coasttocoastam.com. The Coast mobile app is now available for download on iPhones and Android devices. You can become an insider directly through this app. This is a great option for our international listeners, and new users will also receive a free 2-week trial.